And welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. In the last episode, our team of rescue astronauts landed on Duna successfully with only a whisper of fuel remaining, 32.1 liters in each of two tanks for a grand total of 64.2 liters of fuel left on shutdown. And now we are mining kethane, filling up 5,800 liters worth of kethane storage, and at some point we'll start converting that into fuel. In the meantime, however, there is another aspect to this mission, and that is Jebediah has to walk from here to here. So we'll switch to Jebediah. Let this thing load. Here we are. Okay, we see by the nav ball that his ship is pointing basically north. He's going to have to walk northeast a long ways. As a matter of fact, there's a map view in question. And this is probably going to be the main guide, because from what I saw here, I don't see any little target marker up here that would indicate where our target ship is. So Jebediah is going to have to walk over 100 kilometers. Let's go, Jeb. And we're off, walking to the northeast, and in fact jogging. It's going to be a long jog. Put a little bit of physics time warp here to take some of the pain out of this. Oh, I don't know, maybe that might be too fast for Jeb. But basically, that's what's going to have to happen for the next quite a long while. He's going to have to go quite a bit just to get to where he's showing separate from the ship. So, Jebediah's long walk begins. I'm going to try not to use the EVA pack fuel, because he's going to need that to get into the target ship. Although there might be times when it might be easier or safer to use the EVA pack to fly over obstacles in the way. I'm going to try to avoid that, though. And so, as I said, Jebediah's long walk has begun. Then I'll check in later with a progress update. And so Jebediah Kerman has been walking now for an hour, just over an hour of mission elapsed time since he left his capsule. We'll take a look back here, and he's come 7.5 kilometers in an hour. And he still has far enough to go that the distance marker for the target ship still does not show. Seen on the map view, it doesn't look like he's gone very far at all. He's got a long ways to go. So, having taken a breather, he begins walking, begins jogging again, and continuing on at 4x time acceleration, which does seem to be working out okay. And we'll check in again later. And now Jebediah has been jogging across the desolate desert wastelands of Duna for 2 hours now. And taking a look back along the way he came, he has come 15 kilometers. And on the map, that 15 kilometers doesn't look like very much. He's got probably something over 100 kilometers left to go. And so he continues on his journey, thinking about the cutthroat solitaire championship that is awaiting him on his return, the significant raise in pay that he feels he deserves for surviving this trip, and the hazard pay that should have accumulated for his entire time absent from Kerbin. And he proceeds to continue his desperate jog, looking for the ship that has come to bring him home. And so it's now nearly 5.5 hours that Jebediah has been walking across the plains of Duna. And finally, he gets a blip in his suit radio. It could only be the transponder of the rescue ship. Looking around, he sees the signal from the transponder of his own ship 34 kilometers away. Looking around some more, at 99.9 kilometers away, the transponder for the rescue ship. And so he changes his course to jog toward that transponder. Now hopeful, he finally has something to follow that will put him definitely on course to where he needs to go and get him there in the shortest amount of time. A little bit of hope rises because he can actually see signs of some other life besides his own on this desolate ball of rock and dust as he walks and trudges through the night across the plains, the blood-red sands of Duna. And so his trek continues for another 99.8 kilometers. Jebediah Kerman has been walking across the surface of Duna throughout the night. 13 hours since he left his ship. He is now 1.5 kilometers away from the rescue ship, and he can actually see a faint outline of it in the distance on the slope ahead. And so, finally, with one last burst of energy, he commences again to jogging, to cover that last bit of distance, and finally climb into a capsule and go to sleep for about 3 days. And let the astronauts in that ship that came here, let them handle the matter of refueling and flying back to Kerbin. Jebediah's earned a rest. And finally, Jebediah draws near to the ship. As it is dutifully mining kethane. To refuel for the trip home. The EVA ladder extends, and a weary Jebediah gratefully grabs hold of the ladder and climbs into the capsule as the mining operation continues. The capsule at the top of the ship awaiting him. Yikes. Looks like Jebediah has slipped off the ladder. Oh. Faceplant. Just what he didn't need. After all this time, trouble getting into the ship. Apparently there's a section of ladder rung missing. Activate the EVA pack. At least he can set down gently. Perhaps he can use the EVA pack to get aboard. And then he climbs aboard the capsule. And Jebediah Kerman can finally rest. Meanwhile, the kethane extracting operation has been continuing, and now the conversion operation begins as we convert it to fuel. Apparently the conversion process is rather loud, so I will skip ahead to when the fuel tanks are full. A few hours later, the fuel tanks are full. The RCS tanks are now once again full. We turn off the extractors. The kethane tanks are full, with a grand total of 5,800 liters of fuel, 5,800 liters of kethane for further conversion along the way if need be. And so our crew is ready to go home, our ship is fully loaded, and something has occurred to me. With not only taking on a full load of fuel, but also 5,800 liters of kethane, there is a question of the thrust-to-weight ratio, which right now is at 0.84, which means this ship does not have enough thrust to lift into orbit. That means that any attempt to lift off right now is going to result in a crash because it doesn't have enough thrust to lift itself. And since there is no fuel dump mechanism on this ship, the only way to get rid of some of this weight is to sit here and burn fuel at minimum thrust, just enough thrust to burn fuel without being enough to lift off. And so we just barely activate the engine and begin burning fuel until the thrust-to-weight ratio reaches something over 1. And at that point, along the way, we can convert kethane into fuel, and this thing will have enough fuel to get where it's going, but it needs to have enough thrust to get off the ground. Right now, it doesn't. And so, the waiting game begins, because we can't run the engines any faster or it'll start to lift off and tip over. I'll be back when the thrust-to-weight ratio is greater than 1. Alright, it's been another long wait as I burned off enough fuel to bring the thrust-to-weight ratio finally up to 1.01, which, as I understand it, is just pretty much barely enough to lift off. But it is greater than 1, so it is enough to counteract the force of gravity. In order to achieve this, the main fuel tank is now down to 2,100 liters of fuel, and I also burned off all 1,100 liters of RCS fuel because it occurred to me on the trip out here I didn't need RCS except for a little bit during the landing maneuvers. Landing at Kerbal is going to be much simpler because of the parachute recovery and all that. So I won't be needing any RCS fuel on the way back. There is plenty of SAS torque in the capsule, and that will be enough. And there's something else I noticed. Apparently kethane in the kethane tanks does not have mass, because I tried the idea of burn off some fuel and then convert kethane into fuel to eliminate mass from the kethane tanks, and as I converted kethane into fuel, the mass went up and the thrust to weight ratio back down. So I mined up some more kethane, topped off the kethane tanks, and apparently that doesn't have mass until it gets converted into liquid fuel. It's obviously not quite right, but I'd say 40.3 tons is the maximum liftoff weight of this ship on Duna. But now I think finally we're ready to go. And so, let's see, I can close the kethane stuff for right now. I'm going to keep the vessel information handy because I want to watch that thrust to weight ratio. Let's see. I think the Smart ASS should handle everything we need. All right, SAS on, precision controls, and okay, let's move this out of the way, assuming we're allowed to. Okay, we'll leave it to where it is. And let us go, full thrust. And let's have Smart ASS bring us to a 90-degree pitch. Get ready for an 85-degree pitch. There we go. That's better. Our liftoff is slow, gradual, but we're gaining altitude. Very slowly, I admit. Let's take an 88-degree pitch, something close to 90, but something that'll point us in the correct direction. Okay, as we begin to lift off, our thrust to weight ratio is improving, and we are gradually beginning to accelerate. Let's bring our pitch down to 85 degrees. Start gaining some horizontal velocity. I do believe we have enough fuel to get into orbit where we can then convert that kethane into more fuel. And let's go ahead and bring the landing gear up. We shouldn't be needing that again. Very slowly gaining altitude and velocity, pitching over to 80 degrees now to start picking up velocity a little bit quicker. Going to have to redesign this ship before I fly another one like it. Pitching to 75 degrees. Get our velocity increase going up a little faster. Push the apoapsis ahead of us and up. Because right now, We don't have much of one. Thrust to weight ratio is gradually improving as our ship's mass drops. We're climbing at a better rate now. I've done the math on it, by the way, and the 5,800 liters of kethane is enough to convert into another 1,400 liters of liquid fuel, which we can do once we achieve orbit. We're starting to show something of an orbital arc. I'm going to pitch over to 70 degrees. Get our velocity increasing horizontally as well. Apoapsis is about 1 kilometer ahead of us now. This is good. Velocity 134 meters per second and accelerating. We should just nicely have enough delta V to get a decent orbit from the looks of this. Approaching 10 kilometers altitude, which is for Duna about, well, it's definitely out of the thicker part of the atmosphere. The Duna atmosphere pretty much tops out at 50 kilometers as opposed to 70 on Kerbal. So I would say that once we get a good 50 kilometer altitude, we're probably pretty much guaranteed an orbit. It's going to cost us most of our current fuel supply to do it, I think. Pitching over to 65 degrees. Getting a very good climb rate now. 15 kilometers altitude and climbing, pitching to 60 degrees. Okay, this is starting to look like it might turn into an orbit eventually. We're still pushing it ahead and up. That's what counts. Pitching to 55 degrees, continuing to increase our orbital velocity. Apoapsis is now about 4 kilometers ahead of us and continuing to increase. Pitch down to 50 degrees. And it looks like our 4 Kerbals are going to get home. Jeb's enjoying the ride. Bloodlorf and Bill and Welsherby are all crapping their pants, which is why Jebediah is actually glad to be in the lone capsule on top instead of down below, where it probably doesn't smell very nice right now. Okay, let's pitch over to 45 degrees. And once our apoapsis reaches about 100 kilometers, by then I want to be pitched over to flat horizontal. Yes, this is going to turn into an orbit. It was a little touch and go there for a while, but at this altitude, this low thrust to weight ratio will be enough. Whereas on the surface it was, well, you saw how we took off, just barely. Pitch back to 40 degrees now. Apoapsis is 60 kilometers and climbing. Pitch down to 35 degrees. We are definitely going to achieve orbit, no problem. Pitching down to 25 degrees. And now to flat horizontal. Our apoapsis is over 100 kilometers now. In fact, at this point, we can cut the engines and coast a bit, save some fuel, of which we have not very much left. Of course, now we can convert some of this kethane into fuel. Okay, that's enough of that noise for a while. About 3 minutes out from apoapsis. Okay. Let's align prograde and give ourselves an orbit. Bring the periaps up to about 150 or so, and that should be enough. Actually, I'd call that good enough right there by itself. All right. All right, we have a good situation here. We have an actual orbit. Let's see, our inclination is about 14 degrees. Probably be a good idea to bring that closer to something equatorial, I think. So hard to line that up. Okay, we're on orbit normal. Accelerate time a little bit. Okay, we're just about in position. Do a little bit of a plane change here and get our orbit in line with everything else. Yes, that's going to be in line with Kerbal as well. All right, and let us do it. Inclination is dropping. Get that down about to 0 and cut it. Okay, we stop right there. We're going higher now. All right, now the position we need to burn for Kerbal is going to be around here someplace. Let's see what the protractor says. And I bet you it agrees with me, right around in here. Let's accelerate time and get over there. Okay. Orient prograde. And Jebediah can take one last look out the port and say goodbye to Duna, as he's done with Duna. And we burn. Burn for Duna escape. How's our fuel? Got 1,200 liters on board and a bunch more kethane, so we're good. Frankly, based on the amount of Delta V we have available, we might not even eat anymore. I don't know. Orbit is out past Ike. We should have escape anytime. We have Duna escape. All right. Let's go ahead, just for grins, and warp ahead to Duna escape. What happened to our escape? It apparently turned into a really high ellipse. Okay, now we have our escape back. Go ahead and get to it. Okay, we are in solar orbit now. Go ahead and go prograde to that. Actually, no, we want retrograde to that, because we want to slow our orbit and come down to Kerbin's orbit. Probably have an encounter over on this side somewhere. And so, let us burn. And once again, we have the wonderful delay, or time-consuming part, of the fact that these engines, while powerful, are very slow. Go ahead and start converting more fuel. In fact, I'm going to cut thrust, and I'm going to go ahead and convert the rest of this kethane into fuel, and I'll come back when that's done, because I don't suppose anybody really needs to listen to however long that would take. All right, all of the kethane has been converted into fuel. We have 2,416 liters in the main tank, 400 in each of the side tanks. All of the kethane tanks are empty, which is fine. Now we can go ahead and continue doing our retrograde burn to lower our solar orbit down to Kerbin's orbit and look for an encounter. We probably didn't need all that fuel for this maneuver, but it never hurts to have it anyway. As I always say, I would rather have something and not need it than to need it and not have it. I do wish that this extra capsule had been placed in such a way that it didn't obscure the mission elapsed time clock, because now it's going to bother me that I won't be able to know how long this flight took to get all the way back to Kerbin, because that's the only place the mission elapsed time is displayed. Well, no, I take that back. It is also displayed at the tracking station. I suppose I could switch to the tracking station briefly to see what that is just before doing Kerbin re-entry. And I might do that. Let's see, our Kerbin closest approach is coming up on this side. And it is gradually getting closer. I figure we should end up having an encounter over in this region somewhere. It just jumped over here. Okay. Take any encounter I can get. Getting closer. Throttling back to try not to overshoot. We have an encounter. Kerbal periapsis 62,000 kilometers. Let's see if we can bring that down a little bit. Very good, very good, very good. Whoops, going back up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. And we'll accelerate time and get around to there. And as we get closer, we can fine-tune the closest approach. And as the ship finally pulls away from Duna for the last time, closing in on a Kerbal orbit, 30 days from home. $10 out. Let's pause here for a moment. Have a closer look at this encounter. See if we can bring this periapsis down a little bit more. Okay. I would say what we need is a little bit of plane change. And that should do what we need it to do. If I can get my mouse to stay in position. A little bit of thrust. Okay, that was the wrong direction. Okay, that's fine. And we'll plane change the other way. Bring that Kerbal periapsis down. Oh, it's going up again. All right, at this point, I would say that a 7,000 kilometer periapsis is a good start. So we'll get back into the time warp and close the distance. Kerbal sphere of influence coming up. Kerbal periapsis, 5,300 kilometers. Okay. I think we can turn off the protractor now. There's also a moon encounter, but I don't think Jebediah wants to go to the moon right now. As a matter of fact, let's retrograde and see if we can bring that periapsis down a little bit. Actually, let's go ahead and get closer in. And just arrange for a Kerbal capture. Old Jebediah is really glad to see the familiar skies of home, even if he is still in them. Just about time for that critical braking maneuver. All right. There it is. And as our pilots begin the retrograde burn, Jebediah is looking out the port, thinking, doggone it, it's good to be home. There's got to be a solitary championship just waiting for me to trounce everybody. You see, Jebediah is excited. He's coming home. It's a slow burn, but we got more juice than we're ever going to need for this maneuver. Well inside the moon's orbit. Get enough braking going and this thing will curve over here and that encounter will disappear. A little bit of physics time warp to help us along. Moon encounter is no more. Orbit is definitely curving around quickly now. Almost to capture. And we have capture. Periapsis inside the Minmus orbit. Very soon inside the moon orbit. It's a severely inclined orbit, but that's not a problem. There's lots of places to land. Periapsis down to 2,500 kilometers. Now we can just go ahead and bring that down to about 30 kilometers and guarantee a re-entry right off the bat. Jeb doesn't care where he lands as long as he lands. Bring that periapsis down to about a little below 30. That's good. We are now on a re-entry course. So now we will advance time and close in. And once again, I'm arriving on the night side of a planet. This does not surprise me anymore. Although it looks like Jeb may be coming down on in the daytime area. Apparently we're coming back in a retrograde orbit. Headed towards the sunrise. Go ahead and orient the ship sideways like so. And we can jettison everything now. Orienting like that, the lower section is pretty much guaranteed to not impact the capsule, which is guaranteed now to be re-entering. Periapsis is down below 19 kilometers. The apoapsis is coming down fast. And now let's go ahead and activate the parachutes. We have 4 of them here. That should be plenty. They will be deploying right about now. It looks like it's going to set down upside down, but I don't suppose anybody's going to really... Jeb doesn't care. He's just glad to be home. These guys are just having a crap in their pants festival, but that's all right. That's what they do. And after several years, spaceflight and time on Duna, Jebediah Kerman is perhaps now the best cutthroat solitaire player in all of Kerbal history. And I'm certain he will have a shelf or a bookcase full of trophies to prove it very soon. Not to mention the book and movie rights to his story. Parachutes open, ship slows down to a nice safe landing speed, and Jebediah Kerman is home. Landing in the wee early morning hours. Now he doesn't care where, because the surface is not blood red. And he can walk around without a space helmet. And here we are, successful landing, a good end to an aggravating but successful flight. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. I'm out of here.